There's been plenty of encounters on the reservation. Isaac's going to be talking about some of those as well as his own encounters with the Sasquatch. So look for that here in a moment. Remember, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com, and we are up to episode 199. I know the big 200's coming, and I've been kind of throwing around ideas on what to do for the 200th episode. I really wanted to do the Omega, or Omegle, however you pronounce it, and talk with fans. And I may end up doing that for an upcoming show. I just needed more time for that. But for the episode 200, I got a lot of things planned. It may spill over into a part 2. I'm going to be having the Outlaws on, Bear and Kumbo and Matt, as well as Bob Garrett. I think Woody's going to return. So it should be a party, and you guys are invited. So come hang out with us for episode 200. I'm really looking forward to it and been trying to plan it all week. So hopefully it'll be a great show. I hope you guys show up. It'll be a party. Let's have a great time. Well, let's get back to business tonight. I want to welcome Isaac to the show. Isaac, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you, Wes, and appreciate you bringing me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're from the Ute tribe. I know there was a lot of stories that your grandfather talked about, and probably a lot of the different tribal members have talked about. If you would kind of tell us a little bit about that. What do they call it in your language? And if you would talk about just some of the information that the tribe talks to you about regarding these creatures.
Yes, our history with the Sasquatch, it dates back into the 1800s and the old stories like that. The way we pronounced Sasquatch in our language, it was a Ute language. We called him Siach, which basically meant giant. Among other things, he was known as a child snatcher in our stories and folklores about how this creature lived among the tribe, the Ute tribe in particular. And he was a very, I would say, a violent creature at times, but in other ways, there were some of them that were really gentle. My grandfather used to tell a story about these creatures. There were two different kind of creatures. There was one that was he was a brown colored creature. This one in particular, he was said to be a carnivorous type of creature. He was a hunter. He ate flesh, meat. He was a carnivorous creature. He also was known and said to be a child snatcher and would eat humans at the same time. And then there was the black one, which was said to be more of a gentler creature, more of a omnivore. He would eat plants, meat, vegetation that would be out in the forest. And he was more of a gentler type, probably more of a one that wouldn't bother and just, try to mind his own business and go about what they would do.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I know even Bob down in Texas had mentioned that one time to me, and I thought, I wonder why he's mentioning the colors, because he's almost said word for word what you just said. And, he's never said it on the air, but he would talk about the brown ones being more violent, flat out will kill you, and the black ones are, he would say, like the Patterson-Gimlin type, he thought were smarter than the other ones. Did your family ever have any run-ins, besides your own encounter? Did your grandfather ever have any run-ins with them?
My grandfather used to say that when he was young, back on the reservation, they had homesteads on the reservation where the tribal people lived in cabins back in the early days, in the early 1900s, the late 1800s. They lived in cabins, and he would say that these creatures would come out at dark and they would search for food, and sometimes they would even be seen looking into the windows of their cabins. That's why we had stories, they passed on stories about this creature and saying that, telling the children not to play outside after dark because these things would come out and try and take them. We have a story. There's a story on this creature in our folklore. In the English version, it's called, we called it Sea Atch and the Boy. And this story was about some children that were playing out, and their parents was telling them not to play out, and they weren't listening, and they wanted to stay out and play. So eventually the kids wandered out into the field, and one of them was taken by one of these creatures and put into a big sack. So
How the story ends, is it because these creatures were going to eat them after they took them?
yes, they actually did end up taking these kids and eating them.
So I'd imagine that's kind of terrifying. I mean, you're not, they're referring to a real creature. It's not like the boogeyman where it doesn't really exist. They're actually referring to something that exists. Did the tribe ever talk about what they think these things are?
No, it was more like kept untold, just mainly shared amongst family members and stuff like that. It was never really investigated or anything ever come of it. Just the tribal people knowing of these creatures that existed and to beware of them.
When did your encounter take place?
I was about 8 years old. It was in northeastern Utah here on my reservation. And the date was, I believe it was about in May of 1985.
And tell us what happened. Walk us right into the encounter. Tell us what you were doing and what you experienced.
Okay, me and my siblings and my cousins, I had an older sister and 5 other of my cousins. We came out for a family get-together, and me and my cousins planned to sleep outside in the tents behind my aunt's backyard. So we set up our tents and played for a while until it got dark. We decided to go to bed and get inside our tents. And on this property, our tent was set up on the west side of the property. It was a neighborhood that was a tribal neighborhood. It was more of the houses were built in an east to west direction, so there was houses that were stacked in like a 6-pack type setting with a street that ran down the middle. So we got to bed, and on the west side of my aunt's house, there was our neighbor. He was an older, elderly man as well, and he had his garden on his side of the property. He had corn, and he was growing squash and tomatoes and other stuff in his property there in his backyard. And he had this huge Doberman Pinscher. It was a very mean dog, really aggressive. I guess he had that Doberman there to kind of protect his garden. And my older male cousin, he had a black Labrador Retriever for his pet, which he was a really good guard dog, really aggressive. At times, he was really protective of other stray dogs when they would come around and try to bark at him or any of us kids. So he would really stand up to these stray dogs. And back in those days, stray dogs were really abundant on the reservation, so they were like their own breed. Sometimes they could be very vicious and just outright mean. They weren't scared of anything. And they did a lot of barking at whatever was out there at night. They really weren't scared of whatever would be walking around, as far as like your prowlers and stuff like that. So we decided to go to bed, and I remember I was sleeping and everybody else was asleep, and it was towards the later night. I'm thinking it was closer to midnight, somewhere around there. I was just suddenly awakened by what sounded like these huge dumpsters being slammed, because there were dumpsters on the east side of the neighborhood. down at the very end, and the tribal members would dump their trash into these 3 giant dumpsters. So those things went boom, slammed really hard, like they were being tipped over and moved around. And the neighborhood dogs and the tribal stray dogs were really barking really, really violently as these things were, sound like they were going through the garbage. And so I just laid there and listened, and I thought, well, maybe it's just the stray dogs getting in there and fighting with each other. So I kind of just relaxed for a little while. But whatever it was started moving westward up the neighborhood, and these dogs were just barking their heads off and fighting with whatever it was. As they got closer, these things, you could hear them like they ran from a distance, because they were really huffing and growling, really like it came from a large animal. And they started rummaging through my aunt's garbage and moving things around. It sounded like there were 3 of them, because you could hear one over there across the street. There was a vacant house over there. And then it had a garage there, but the doors were unlocked. So you could hear these doors being opened, and then the neighborhood dogs were like attacking them. So they would growl back these things, and it scared the heck out of me, because I didn't have any idea of what these things were. It was my first encounter, and the only thing I could think of is what the heck these things were. They would come around, and you could hear them footsteps. It was heavy footsteps too, like a bipedal, like a person was walking around out there. And the chain link fences would jingle as they would step over these fences. They would step over these fences and get into that garden, and you could hear them eating that, crunching away on them vegetables and some of that corn. And that Doberman Pinscher was tied up, so it really didn't have a lot of access to the creatures that were in that garden. But they were really barking. These things, they sounded like they were communicating with one another. They would make chattering sounds and like groaning. To me, it sounded like a hyena. Hyenas, how they make them chattering sounds. It sounded like a mixture of all kinds of animals in one setting.
That's interesting. So you actually heard them communicating back and forth. Was it almost like one was talking to another one?
Yes. Back in the early days, we never had yard lights in the communities, and the only yard light that was there was on one of my aunt's neighbors who lived on the east side of her property. But it would reflect, the light reflected on the tent, so if anything would have walked by it, you could see the shadow of it. So these things were walking around and rummaging through just about everybody's garbage and whatever it was moving. My cousin had bikes in the back, and you could hear those things moving around, and it was really frightening experience.
It sounds like it, especially you wonder why they were coming down into that area. It must have just been they must have been looking for easy food. Did they ever walk past the tent?
Yes, on several different occasions they walked past. You could hear them walk past and cross over the fence that was just right next to our tent. At one instance, I heard it jump. It sounded like it jumped because it made a real loud thud. And so I was laying there petrified. I was in a cold sweat. I couldn't move. All I could do was move my eyes and hope that this thing wouldn't try to come into our tent or even bother us. So this thing walks past the tent, and as I looked over, I could see the silhouette on the tent, and this thing was walking bipedal. You could see the shoulders and the head outline of this thing, and it walked eastbound, just past between my sister's tent and our tent. And I thought for sure it was gonna try and get into my sister and my cousin's tents, but it walked right past and went into the other property where the dogs started attacking it. They kept attacking it, and then they would. Man, it was hectic because they were growling and fighting back with them dogs. At one time, I heard this loud snapping sound. After that, I heard a dog just wail like it got either kicked or it hit it with a stick or something, because that dog just wailed and like a death cry, and that dog took off. I don't know where it went. It took off into the darkness, and these things were very violent towards them dogs. But the dogs, they weren't backing down from it until it seemed like the dogs would tire from constantly barking and attacking these things. They would actually lay down and rest. And then once these things started getting loud and aggressive, then the dogs would start back up and continue to attack these things.
That's pretty terrifying to sit there and you're listening to all of this going on in your tent. How long did this go on for?
It was an all night thing. At one time they seemed to have left the community, but they headed east back to where they came from. I'm thinking they went to other people's homes and property that lived to the east of the community. Because then you would hear them dogs the homeowners' dogs would start barking to the east of the other houses down there. So they were all over and just running back and forth. But after they did their business in the community, it kind of quieted down. So I kind of relaxed and I fell asleep again. Come to find out, the night wasn't over yet. So then again, the dogs start barking again, and they were right back into the community doing what they were doing.
So they actually came back.
Yeah.
Wow. And so were they were just going from house to house, going through the trash?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, how far from dense forest was your home?
The community, it's surrounded. We have sandstone bluff hills. So to the north of the community, there's a big sandstone bluff, almost like a mountain, but it's got broken chunks of sandstone on the sides. They're huge rocks, and it's probably right around maybe 4,000 feet above sea level. And just right in between the community and the river, right between the community and the bluff, is a river bottom that runs to the north. It runs up into the Uinta Mountains, the high Uintas, and it runs clear up into the Uinta Canyon, where there's pine trees. It's about 30 miles north of the community. And to the south is another river bottom, which is a really swampy area. It's full of cattails, Russian olives, and it's lower country, probably about 3,000 feet above sea level, and it just runs clear down into the Green River of northeastern Utah. The two rivers connect to the Green River.
So you're in a pretty remote location. I mean, for the most part, it's surrounded by a lot of rugged country. The next morning, did you go back and tell anyone about your encounter? Did you tell your parents? Did you tell your grandfather, hey, listen, I got something to tell you?
Yes. Towards the morning time, as the sun started coming up, these things were still kind of rummaging around. As the sun started coming up, the sky started turning kind of the pinkish color, and you could see the light. And these things, they started grunting around again, and they sounded kind of like hogs, like a pig would oink around. And they came together on the other side of the east side of the property, and they ran to the north on a small dirt road that led to one of the other neighbors' houses in the back. They ran towards the north river bottom, towards the big rocky bluff. So I would imagine that that's where they were living, is up in the rocky hill there along the river bottom.
That's interesting that you say that. I had a witness on one time, and he said they sounded like a bunch of pigs. And I was like, really? They sound like pigs? He goes, yeah, it sounded like a bunch of pigs, and then they all left. So that's interesting. I don't know that I've had too many other witnesses really say that. So they leave. Are they, now, obviously they don't come back anymore, I'm assuming.
No, the sun came up shortly after, but at one point, before they gathered and left, my cousin was going to get up. He woke up, and he was going to go to the restroom. And I grabbed him, and I told him, don't go out there. And I said, there's something out there. I said, I don't know what it is, but the dogs are really fighting with whatever it is. And he was kind of half asleep until he kind of woke up, and then he heard all the commotion that was going out there, and he looked at me, and his eyes looked like they were about to jump out of his head, and he said, what are they? What's out there? I said, I don't know. I said, please don't go out there. I pleaded with him, because he was going to go out there and look and go to the restroom. I just told him, don't go out there, because whatever is out there might get you. So he looked at me, and he got a really frightened look because he heard them moving around and making those weird sounds. And so he laid back down, and pretty soon he fell back to sleep. I don't know how he did it, but I wish I could sleep like he does, like a log. But so in the morning we get up, and I asked my sisters and my other cousins if they ever heard what was going on through the night, and they had no idea. No clue at all. And so I told my aunt and my uncle of what I had experienced, and they said they didn't hear too much. They slept good inside the house. And she said, I think you heard Siach. He was out there, she said. She said, you heard Siach, and it's a good thing that you didn't get out of the tent. You stayed in there, because they could have taken you, they said.
How were they so confident that it was Siach?
Mainly because there were other sightings that were going on during that time with other tribal members, like in other communities. There's 3 other communities that are on a reservation, and a lot of people are having these sightings of these creatures.
Well, with everything you described, you would think, you would think it was a Sasquatch going through. They have strange behavior, don't they?
Yes.
I've had a few witnesses in Washington State. There is an area where they're seen all the time. And mainly where they're seen is in this campground. And in this campground, the encounters people have with them is they just kind of stroll in like they run the place, dig through the trash can, and then they leave. Almost like they become too used to people. And it almost makes you wonder around your community. They were obviously too used to the dogs, but if they were too used to the people in the community to where they really didn't have a fear coming in there and digging through the trash in the middle of the night.
Yes. Also, listening to some of the stories on your show, they talk about, to me it seems like they come around when you're at your deepest sleep. I'm thinking, well, maybe they can tell when you're snoring away if you're in a tent, and that's when they come around and sneak around, because my cousins, they were all snoring. You could hear them snoring in the other tent, and my cousin that was in the tent with me, he's a loud sleeper, and these things come around. So I'm thinking maybe they can hear you, sleeping, and they probably feel more comfortable when you're asleep.
I think a lot of your best predators hunt at night. And that's kind of where I put these things is, it's so much easier to, especially with us, we're natural predators and we sleep at night. So they feel more comfortable going around at night. I wanted to ask you, was there people in the community that ever had any aggressive encounters with them or ever had any encounters with them coming up to the windows or banging on houses?
Yes. One year when I was a little younger than 8 years old, we lived in my grandfather's house, which was near the swamp and the cattails east of that neighborhood. We were kids and we were sleeping, and I guess my mom had the windows open to the bedroom, and she said she was awakened by something outside that was making noises. She said it sounded like a seal and a pig, and it was really loud, and it was right by the window, and our windows were open with just screen on the window. So we as kids were all sleeping and unaware of what was going on, but she laid there and listened to it, and it went around the house, she said, and right by the windows by where us kids were laying, but she was too frightened to get up and close the window until it actually left. Then she closed the window. But she said it sounded really scary and she was frightened.
What do a lot of people do on the reservation if they come across one of these things? Do you guys call the tribal police?
Yes, we've had reports with the tribal police, and most of the time, by the time the tribal police get there, the thing is gone, or it probably sees the headlights and it runs away or hides in the brush.
Isaac, you actually had a second encounter. How many years later was it after your first encounter?
We'll fast forward that to, I believe, I'm thinking about 5 years. I was about 14 years old then. And it was after school. What had happened is my friend who lives east of the community, his grandfather had a little job for us to do. So he tells us there's a dead dog that got run over and it's really stinking up the place. So he says, take my truck and go scoop it up. And we go over there and look at it, and it's just crawling with maggots and stinking. So we're thinking, oh man, we have a job. So we decided to back the truck up and we scooped the dog on, the carcass. And this back road, it goes right by a cemetery. There's a cemetery along the dirt road there, probably 2 miles down from where this sighting occurred. And it's a straight shot. It's a straightaway until maybe 3 miles, and then it curves around the little hill there, and then it continues on along the sandstone bluff that's north of the community. Our first plan was to take this carcass and dump it further out into the field away, but being youngsters, we don't really want to do things, so we figure, well, let's just get rid of this thing as soon as we can because it's really stinking. So we go about maybe 3.5 miles from the house, and we pull off on side the road by these huge sandstone rocks, and we dump the carcass right there. And back in that time, where the road went around the hill, there's a hayfield that sits there now. That whole field was just, back then it was full of sagebrush, and there was an old mine there, a mine shaft that was just north of the road, and it was a pretty good sized door, probably a 5.5 foot sized door, which led under into the ground. I'd never gone into there or even snooped around that whole time. Snooped around that place because it looked like a very spooky place to be.
And you're talking about the mine shaft?
Yes, the mine shaft. It was dark and spooky, and it just wasn't a place where kids should play. So as we were headed up west on the road, I was looking around and, enjoying the ride, and didn't see nothing out there on the road. Nobody at all, not even a single car. So it took us maybe 5 minutes to dump off the carcass, and then we turned around and headed back to the house. And this road, this little hill that circled around, it had a little 2-track that went up on top of it, and then it was flat. So we climbed the hill. We did a little bit of four-wheel driving, and as soon as we topped the hill, we stopped, and we looked down the road, and about 150 yards down the road was this huge black figure. I mean, it was in the evening time around 5 o'clock. This thing, it was odd looking, very out of place with how a normal human would walk. You could not see any color to it, pure black, pitch black. Getting a good look at it as it was walking, it was unaware that we had drove up on it. It was moving slow. It had this long hair as if it were a wild man. You could see the hair, the strands of it just hanging off the side of the head. But it had an odd-shaped head. It was more of a square, blocky head with hair hanging off the side. And the shoulders, they were a little bit bigger than the average 6-foot man. And the arms, it walked as the arms swayed. It had long, overly long arms. Going down to the torso was a little more than average man. But these legs is what caught my attention. It was the legs that caught my attention, because these things, the legs were very long and skinny, and it walked as if it was kind of had a staggering motion to it. So as we sit there and watch this thing, it finally realizes that it's being watched, so it turns. And as it turns, we couldn't see a face on it. It was pitch black, pure black face. When it turned to look at us, the whole upper torso would have to twist rather than having a neck to turn and look. The whole shoulders turned in the same direction. And it actually stopped as it turned. It stopped and looked at us. And my friend, he was astonished at what he was seeing. He'd never believed or heard that it could have even been a Sasquatch. And he looked at me and he said, "What is that?" And I said, "Dude," I said, "all I'm going to say is let's just sit here and see where it goes." He was intending to drive down to this thing and get a closer look. And I was frightened, and I told him, I said, "You go down there." I said, "I'm going to get off, and I'll stand on top of this hill, and we'll let you deal with whatever's down there." So he kind of laughed at me and kind of joked with me, calling me that I was afraid. I said, "Yeah, I'm afraid because I know what that is." I said, "And I don't even want to know what the thing looks like or even be close to it." I said, so he was teasing me. He drives off the hill, lines up on the dirt road. So as we drive off the hill, it turns and looks at us again, and it starts walking a little bit faster. It picks up its pace. And we parked, so we were lined up on the straightaway. And this thing keeps looking at us, turning, and it looks as if it's looking for a place to run, but on both sides of the field, it was open. So maybe a quarter mile down is where the brush began. On the north side of the road, there was a small canyon with a bunch of cottonwood trees and thick Russian olive. And on the right side was a river bottom, and it had tall sagebrush along with cottonwood trees for cover. So we were sitting there watching this thing walk down, and it moves from side to side of the lane. And with its stride, it only took maybe one and a half steps to reach either side of the road. So this thing had overly large and long legs to make that kind of stride. And we watched as soon as, I'm thinking about 15 minutes it took to walk down the road, and finally it turns. And for some reason, something caught my friend's attention at that mine shaft, and he was sitting there looking at it, at the mine shaft. Well, he was asking me, where do you think it came from? And I said maybe it's living in that mine shaft. So he was sitting there looking at it, at the mine shaft, and I'm sitting there watching this thing walk down the road. And I told him, dude, it looks like it's getting ready to run. So when it did run, he was looking the other direction, and I seen it. When it ran to the right, and it took only 1.5 steps. And on the right side was a 4-foot barbed wire fence and a line of cottonwood trees with 3.5-foot tall sagebrush in the clearing. So this thing runs across the road and actually steps over the barbed wire fence.
Oh, wow. How tall do you think the creature was?
I'm thinking it was close to maybe 7 feet.
And what happened next?
As it steps over the fence, it disappears behind this giant cottonwood tree, and on the other side is just 3.5-foot tall sagebrush. And then for about maybe 100 yards, and then it turns into Russian olive, and then the river runs along there. So I nudge my buddy, I elbow him real hard. I said, hey, that thing took off. I told him. He said, what? I said, it took off. It took off towards the river. Then he looks at me, and he, without saying anything, he steps on it, and we went cruising down there. And he said, where did it run to? I said, it ran right here. So we stopped. I said, let's see if there's any tracks or what, if it's leaving any tracks. But that whole road was gravel, so it was really hard to see any kind of tracks. And we got off the truck and was looking around, and that barbed wire fence was untouched. It was in very good shape, like nothing had run through it. I'm thinking it stepped right over that thing and just trucked it to the thickest piece of brush it could hide in. So we look at each other and we're both dumbfounded. You know, it was a encounter that he remembers. He never forgot about it. He always reminds me every once in a while, and you know, we just look at each other with amazement, and you know, we have to remind each other it was probably a Sasquatch.
That's a very interesting encounter. I almost wonder if it was coming out for that roadkill that you guys were throwing out there.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe it did, because we went by that mine shaft, and yeah, I'm thinking it picked up on the scent and was probably looking for it.
God, that's a terrifying encounter. You know, it's nice when you're in a car or if you're at a distance like you guys were. You know, it really wasn't being aggressive towards you guys. It was trying to find an exit to get out of there. Did you get the impression it was more of a male or female, or do you have any thoughts on that?
It looked like a male. To me, it looked like a male. It had the chest was flatter, more flatter. It looked more of a slimmer nature. It wasn't really beefed up like a bodybuilder, like some of the encounters were that people described. This one was more of a thinner build, but it was taller.
Did you have any more sightings after this?
That was the main, you know, the longest sighting I've ever had with that. As far as hearing these things in the mountains, I'm an avid hunter, and we've heard on occasion some cries, and they'll get the coyotes to cry with them as well. As soon as they let out their bellow, the coyotes will kick up, and sometimes they'll carry on for a little while.
Does it worry you today coming across one of these things?
Yes, it does. Yes, I don't believe that anybody is safe if you get too close to them. Being in that truck on that daytime encounter, you know, there's a barrier there, but I felt like I was very helpless, and I was even looking for a weapon to defend myself even at that distance. And I did have a feeling of being totally doomed at that time. So yes, it was a very frightening encounter as well.
I bet it's something you and your buddy will never forget.
Yeah, we laugh about it, but you know, that's all we could do is kind of chuckle about it and remind each other that, we're okay now and, not to get too close if we ever do see one in the future.
Well, it's good advice a lot of people should follow. One thing I wanted to ask you, Isaac, is do you guys have any reports of dogmen or what people describe as the dogman?
Yes, we get, I hear a lot of reports of that as well.
What advice does a tribe give? Or what is your knowledge of the dogman?
We really haven't had anybody investigating as far as organizations investigating, but my best advice to anybody is stay in your house and don't go out and try to chase one of these things, because you never know what it can do or how many things are out there. Some of the tribal members, the stories that I've heard is that they've had these glowing eyeballs or glowing eyes, and they hear them growling outside and doing the same thing, banging on the walls of the home.
When I was talking to the Border Patrol, that's one thing that they brought up was the glowing eyes. And it makes you wonder, because I asked them specifically, I said, did you have your lights on it? And many times they did, but these guys aren't dumb. They'd say, it's almost like its eyes were glowing. It wasn't eye shine. There was something different about it. Did you ever camp outside anymore after that?
Yeah, I camped outside. I come to terms with what it was, but I was always weary of, hoping I wouldn't hear those things again. I would camp outside with my friends, but it was just having to deal with whatever it was that was out there and accepting that whatever it was exists and just being glad that it didn't try and mutilate us or try and kill us.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that the tribe calls them child snatchers, and that's pretty common a lot of times with these tribes. They'll say that they'll take your children, they'll eat you, they'll not all tribes, but most of the tribes really have nothing great to say about them. I know there's a tribe here in Washington State, and the tribal elder really has nothing great to say about Sasquatch. They say the same thing. Mainly it's female Sasquatch that'll take your two kids and eat them. But it's interesting because some tribes, they feel it one way or they feel a different way. It's just interesting to talk to different cultures and find out how they feel about these creatures. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Is there still reports today around the community?
Recent one was, I believe it was a month ago, from one of the tribal employees. She said she was at work early in the morning, somewhere around 3 o'clock, and she was warming up her vehicle to go to work at her department. And she said she heard this thing crying and howling around out in the field. And she said it didn't sound like no coyote. It was more of a deeper groaning cry. And she got spooked, so she went back into her office and waited until her car was warmed up. She wasn't going to sit out there and wait for the car to warm up.
Did she ever get a look at it?
I don't believe she did. It was in the distance.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So around the community, do you take reports? Do you talk to people since you had your own encounter?
I would like to. I was thinking about getting something going and just doing a little bit of investigating on some of these incidents. One of my relatives had an incident where she had found some footprints behind her house in the snow. I believe it was in December of last year. And she actually took pictures. I don't know if she still has them, but she has pictures of these tracks, and they look like on the top they have a human footprint, but at the back it is really narrow, as would like if it had a narrow heel or a dog track kind of. So I was thinking maybe it could have been some sort of dog man that was running around in the community as well.
Did the heel go back like a V?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that track before. Well, be safe while you're out there, especially, with these things, they can be very dangerous. And let me know. Keep me updated if anything else goes on around the reservation there, will you, Isaac?
Yes, I sure will.
And I can't thank you enough for coming on.
All right. Thank you for having me, Wes. It was a pleasure being on the show, and look forward to hearing more of the stories and the encounters that the people have.
Thanks, Isaac. I appreciate it, man. And thanks for coming on. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. I'll see you guys this weekend for the Big 200 Bash. Have a good night, everyone.
Real faint. That's it. There's a light right there. What the fuck? What is that glowing light? I don't know. Hey! It's a glowing light in the middle of the woods, dude. Wow, dude, good eyes. Hey! I'm gonna get out and check it out. I don't know what the fuck that is. What is that, dude? I don't know. That's in the middle of nowhere, man. Where would that be? There's nothing down there. Can I point my headlights at it? Well, you gotta be careful. There's a cliff over there, dude. Look at that. That's a glowing light. Trying to fall off the cliff. Give you guys a heads up on what's going on. There's some lights down there. They're like little tiny orb type lights. I don't know what they are. I really don't know what they are. There's nothing down there. There's no... It's not a fire. It's not a... We just drove down there, and I don't know what the hell it is. God, I wish the camera would pick it up, man. I can see it with the naked eye, but I can't. It's not picking it up. Well, I don't see the other one. God, it's frustrating. Now I see one. Here, I'm gonna shut the camera off. Turn the light off so I can see.
And that's actually from a video Woody and I took the other night. We were going up to shoot some B-reel footage. I was going to retell a guy's encounter in that area, and our night got interrupted. We actually came across some strange lights in the forest. I was able to film some of it, and you see the light in the video. If you want to check the video out, it's up on SasquatchChronicles.com under the blog. I think I posted it, Wednesday. But if you want to check out the full video, welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you this evening. Remember, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email, wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. And as I mentioned earlier, if you get a chance, please check out SasquatchChronicles.com. I'd love to hear your encounter. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to have you on the show. Thank you for being here. Well, I want to welcome Woody to the show, my brother Woody. Woody, thanks for being here tonight, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me again. It's always good to get out in the field and do some things with you. Enjoy every minute of it. And I'm glad to be back. Glad to be back part of the show. I wish I could be on more than I can, but I do what I can. So thank you again, man, and thanks for keeping me a part of it.
Yeah, how's the boy doing? For the audience out there that don't know, Woody had a son, a recent boy. He's such a good kid. How's he doing?
He's doing really good. He's real healthy now that we took him out of daycare, and I'm available to take him out of to keep him home most of the time. But he's an ornery little sucker, and I think he likes you more than me. So I think he thinks you're your dad, his daddy.
Yeah, he is pretty ornery. I think he thinks he's 6'5" and like 300 pounds is what I think he thinks in his head. cracks me up.
Well, he is a brick house, and it is kind of funny.
Yeah, he's got an attitude to go along with it. Kind of reminds me of a guy I used to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I know we went up to the woods, and for the audience out there, they can check out the video again on SasquatchChronicles.com. Woody and I, we were going up. Basically, what I wanted to do, and I can't even talk tonight, what I wanted to do was go up to the mountain, and there's a location up there where someone had an encounter. I wanted to film it and just kind of shoot the area, retell this person's encounter. It was great that you came, Woody, because of that hidden road you and I were talking about, how to get to the opposite side of the Lewis River. But for the audience, Woody and I are heading up this ridgeline. There's probably like an hour and a half, realistically, of footage. I think I cut it down to about 18 minutes. But, I was just shooting B-roll footage. We were just kind of relaxing and having a good time. And then all of a sudden, you stop the car. You're like, hey, check out this light.
It's a road that I've never been on before. And I was always kind of quite curious on how to get on the other side of the river. So when Wes said that to me, I was quite intrigued. So I was like, let's go. I'm game. So we were cruising up that road, and I don't know, doing 15 miles an hour. It's a pretty rough road, man. I mean, 10 might even be a little bit overkill, but we were cruising up, and I'm looking down at the river. I'm trying to catch a glimpse of the river. It's just gorgeous. If you've never been up there, it's absolutely gorgeous, people. I mean, it's probably the most beautiful scenery that you've ever seen in your life. You really have to take a chance to get up there. But I'm looking down on my left-hand side because I'm on the driver's side. And we're headed northeast. I'm looking down, and boom, there it was. There was a freaking light, and I shut the whole car down, off, lights off, ignition off, everything off, and I said, "Look." And I think that's at the point where you actually got the first, what are we going to call them? Orbs? I mean, I hate to use the word orbs, but.
I guess I'd call them orbs. Just like a ball of light. It cracked me up when I was watching the video. I was like, man, we really do cuss like sailors when we're not on air. I mean, I had to bleep out so many F words out of that video because you're like, what the F? And I'm like, what the F is that? And I played a portion of it right before we went on air. And yeah, man, I guess I'd call it orbs. I mean, balls of light. I mean, I don't know what you want to call them. I don't know what they were.
So anyways, we're cruising up the road, this main road, which I've never been on before. I look over and I see this ambient light, and I'm like, holy shit, or holy smokes, this is really bright. So I shut everything down, shut the car down, shut everything down, and I was wanting you to get over with your camera to take a shot at it. Well, you did. You actually got the shot of that light that was right above the Lewis River. We were just kind of like freaking out. I mean, I don't know what the word is for it. We were just kind of like, oh my God, what is this? And so that went on for quite some time. And then we moved upward. And not only did we move upward, there was another one. Not quite as bright. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on here? There's, okay, 1, 2. Now we're on number 2, which is not as big as number 1, but number 2 is it's still there. It's still an ambient light. And I would call the colors anywhere, and they ranged almost in kind of in colors. I would say they were kind of a white blue color. There was a lot going on, but that's what I'm going to stick with. And I said, hey, get out, film this. And that's when you kind of took over.
It threw me off because especially the second one was really moving around. The first one was pretty stationary. The second one was actually, it looked like it was floating around, and I don't know what it was. And so, you and I've seen fire. I mean, people have seen fires. When you see a fire, when you see someone's flashlight, these things didn't move like flashlights. these things moved very smooth, kind of floating around, and almost kind of like following us when we first started heading up that hill. That's why I said, hey, let's turn around, let's go back down to the bottom, and let's see if we can find out where they're at. So we turned the car around, head down the hill, and we're on the opposite side of the Lewis River. There's nothing over there. There's no fire. There's no one's over there. There's no cars. There's no people.
Well, not to interrupt you, but I even yelled out. I yelled out and said, hey, who is it? Who is it? Who is it? Is it a fire? Or do you have a fire? You know what I mean? I made our acknowledgement known because you were going to throw a bullet at it, and I didn't want to. So
yeah, right. Well, that's the other thing too. You know, you hear Woody, you know, like with the gun in the background, and I made I jokingly said, let's put a bullet in one of these orbs and we'll drag one of these things out too. And I take all sorts of heat, man. I don't know if people listen to the show over and over and over again, and they pick out little things that I say, but I got so much heat for that, and people need to lighten up. I'm pretty sure you can't shoot an orb. I mean, I'm just guessing. I don't have an orb in my garage I'm studying, but I'm pretty sure you can't shoot one. And so we were just, I don't know that it really scared me. I was just interested by it. I was just fascinated with it, trying to figure out what it was. And what threw me off is as it kind of moved, you know, normally I'm pretty careful about where I walk in the forest, but as this thing moved, it would have been really easy to step over that cliff.
Yeah, and like I said, I even talked about maybe, okay, let's walk down the cliff. You know, let's check it out, see what's going on. It was just too much, man. It was the terrain itself with not a lot of light and not with the proper gear was impassable. Well, I mean, I'll just say that. And so, anyways, I was on this big GPS thing. I'm going to GPS it now, and so I got an idea of where it was at, and we decided to circle back around. So we circled back around all the way around to the other side of the river. Where did it put us?
It put us over by our encounter spot.
Exactly.
Which kind of
exactly.
Yeah, kind of.
Exactly. So it put us over by our encounter spot, and so that was freaky enough. Isn't you know, that was freaky. And we saw nothing. We went and checked the river out. It's all blocked off by these big, huge rocks. I say huge rocks. They're probably 5, 6, 7, 8 feet tall, enough to where a man can't climb over them. Or if you did, you know, more power to you, I guess. But so we headed back around to the original spot, and I hit the odometer on my car, and I was like, okay, we're 6.7 miles away from where we were in a straight line. So, boom, here we go. We went across the bridge, went up the ridge line, came up the ridge line. Guess where we were at? 6 miles. I don't know what to say, man, but pretty soon we started when we're like, okay, well, I don't know what's going on here, but we moved up a little bit further, and that's when we saw the third one. Now, the third one was very dim. It was very dim. In fact, you had to get out of your car. You had to have everything. You had to have everything right into play. I saw it. The camera wasn't picking it up. I had binoculars. They weren't picking it up. It was only to pretty much to the naked eye that I could figure out that it was picking it up. There were no threat whatsoever, but it seemed like that they were kind of following us, all three of them, 1, 2, 3, and it seems like they were kind of following us up north, like they were kind of watching us. That kind of got a little bit disturbing. Yeah, I mean, it followed us. The lights followed. Man, I don't even know what to say.
They followed us up. We ended up, well, I guess to make a long story really short, we ended up driving away from them because it did seem like they were following us. And I don't know what they were. Again, I know a lot of people, they freak out because they're, oh, Wes is talking about the paranormal, or oh, Wes is talking about lights, or And why not report it? You know, if you see something weird out in the woods, why not report it? Why not come out and say, hey, this is what I saw. This is what we experienced. I'm not saying Sasquatch and these lights are...
Well, here's the biggest thing, man. Here's the biggest thing is, okay, we've seen Sasquatch. We've been there firsthand, seen it. Okay, now we're seeing these orbs. I'm not a true believer in orbs. I never have been. And for me to see this was a new, completely eye-opener for me because I was called bull on everybody else that talked about them. And it really opened my eyes onto what the hell's going on? You know what I mean? What the hell is going on?
It was a weird night, that's for sure. It definitely was a weird night. And I was always skeptical of the orbs too, which is kind of odd because if you think about it, I mean, you believe in an 800-pound monkey running around the forest, but you don't believe in these orbs flying around. It seems kind of ridiculous, but I was in the same boat with you. I was always kind of like, I don't know about that. When you see them, it makes you a believer pretty quick. And I'll tell you the other thing that was strange about the lights. They weren't just flying around aimlessly. It almost seems like they were being controlled or there was something weird about it, man. It wasn't...
Or they had a brain of their own, themselves type thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much... They were flying around like intelligently controlled. And I'm just glad that I got it on film this time. I'm just glad we got it on camera this time. Because, if we didn't, people would be like, oh, here we go again, these two guys.
Wes and Woody, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Wes and Woody. But I'm telling you that we ran into it. And if you want to check the video out, it's on SasquatchChronicles.com. The one was really lit up. I got the one really good. And you can see the whole video and watch the whole thing. And what they are, I don't know. I'm not claiming anything. I'm not claiming that it's part of Sasquatch. For people out there listening, I feel like I have to say that a million times. Otherwise, you'll read on Reddit, Wes and Woody claim Sasquatch and orbs are one and the same, or, whatever people write. But it was interesting, man. It was kind of a weird night because we wanted to get away from the lights. At first, we were fascinated by them, and we almost were giving chase to them. And then I think we kind of came to our senses and we were like, hey, let's get out of here. And then we ended up on Silver Star Mountain, and I never knew where Silver Star Mountain was. And then all of a sudden we found it, and we're in the middle of... We were kind of lost, actually. We were kind of lost in the woods. And when we went up on Silver Star Mountain, I think I had 1 or 2 bars, and I posted on Facebook, lost. And luckily, you can do the check-in thing on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, we're on Silver Star Mountain. Which is what, 20 minutes, 30 minutes from Carson?
Yeah, on the other side, yeah.
Just weird, man. We're like in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally, like...
I had no idea where we were at, too, but I tell you what, when we went up to Silver Star Mountain, there was some creepy things going on there, too. I'm not, I hate to always say, hey, this is weird, and I'm trying to make everything weird, but I'm going to tell you this. Up at the very top of Silver Star Mountain, there was some dugout trenches, and there had recently been some people there, and I'm not sure what type of people were there. I'll leave it at that. They were doing very weird things there at Silver Star Mountain, and that's all I'm going to say.
There was some strange things going on at Silver Star Mountain. I don't know what was going on, but there was a famous Bigfoot footage that was taken from Silver Star Mountain.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
And I can see why, man. I mean, God, you're literally in the middle of nowhere up there.
Well, and then another thing is we got kind of to a point. Okay, so we headed up there to Silver Star Mountain. We found the spot. The road was kind of getting washed out, right? I mean, water was all over the road, and I didn't know how much further we wanted to go, really. So we kind of turned around, went the opposite direction. I didn't want to get stuck, and I'd like to go up there during the day and see exactly what we were looking at, because what I saw that night was completely creepy. But I want to see I want to go there during the day is what I want to do.
And for the audience out there too, we'll go back. We'll get a daytime footage of where that light's at. And I think when people see where that light's at during the day, it'll make no sense at all. that there was a light there. I mean, zero sense at all. It's not an area that you can even climb down during the day safely. I mean,
it's above the water. How do you assume that?
Yeah, I'm not going to climb down that thing. But I'll show you. I'll show the people the footage from the daytime. That whole area, man, it's just creepy. It's just there's very few places I've been to in my life where I get creeped out, and that's one of those areas where I just get creeped out in that whole area. And the lights just is icing on the cake. You know what I mean? It's just icing on the cake for that whole area up there. And one of the things you brought up, Woody, is that area really is a beautiful area. I mean, it's pristine. You can drink the water. There's waterfalls everywhere. As you drive down the road, there's waterfalls on the side of the road. It's just beautiful. And if I was a Sasquatch, that's where I would hang out. I mean, honestly, that's where I would hang out. I'd never leave the area. There's no reason to. But these lights, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to. I'm just glad we got it on film this time for people so they can look at it. And I hope other people come forward. A lot of researchers, quote-unquote researchers, experts, whatever they call themselves, they'll say, well, why are you talking about this? Why don't you just stick to Bigfoot? Well, sometimes when you're out in the woods, you come across other things. You come across weird things. Why not talk about it? Well, I don't understand the taboo about talking about it. It's not... I wasn't going to go up and pet the orbs and feed them an apple.
I was going to shoot them.
Yeah. Well, you got to be careful saying that, man. You got to be careful saying that.
No, but I wasn't. I did call out. I called out several times. Hey, who are you? What are you? Is it a campfire? What is it? Da-da-da-da. And really, realistically, I wasn't going to shoot him, but it sure makes a guy think. What is it?
Yeah, it sure makes you think. That's for sure. Well, I guess until the next adventure, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad we got the opportunity to. These days we don't have much opportunity to go out anymore. But let's do it again. Let's go find those frickin' orbs.
Yeah, shoot one, drag it in. Yeah, study it in the garage. No, it's yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on. Yeah, Woody, everyone. Thanks for coming on, brother.
You bet, man. You bet. Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting up with me, and I look forward to hearing from you all again, and I'll be jumping on from time to time. Thanks again. Have a good night, everybody.
And I guess that's our adventure in lights. Thanks for coming on, Woody. Appreciate it, man. I'll talk to you soon. And next up on the show, I want to welcome Seth. Seth, thanks for being on tonight, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Wes. I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show.
No, the honor's all mine. And if you would, now, you had an encounter when you were younger. Do you want to start with that one? Just tell us what you were doing. Tell us what you experienced, what you ran into. Just walk us right into it.
Okay, Wes. Well, I was 15 years old at the time, so it was about 18 years ago. My family had moved up, and I was what people would call, I was a city slicker. I mean, I was just, I was homeschooled. We lived in a state park here in the area, and it was just kind of every night to get out of the house. I would get out and I would walk the dog and just kind of walk the roads. By doing that, I started kind of familiarize myself as to what, animals are out there and, the sounds they make. And there's a road in the area that was a day use only road. And by this point, I'd gotten comfortable enough with the roads where I didn't need like a really high power flashlight or anything. So I had really kind of a real weak flashlight with me. I was walking the dog down this road and came up and the dog sniffed around. Well, then the dog started acting just really erratic. And was just really wanting to leave. And I heard a noise and I shined the light again. It was a weak flashlight. But, man, I lit up a pair of red eyes that wasn't too far from me. And from where I was standing, I mean, I could estimate this thing's probably about 8.5 feet tall, easy. And when the lights hit it, I've lit up deer with my flashlights. I lit up raccoons, and I've lit up all kinds of animals. I've never lit up anything with red eyes. And so, I mean, that kind of freaked me out initially.
Yeah.
And
shocked me.
yeah. Well, what it was, I mean, just it backed up and, I mean, just turned and basically walked away. I mean, I know now, or I strongly suspect now. I mean, I saw a Sasquatch, but it, kind of made note which direction it was going, and then followed my dog's cue, and me and my dog we took off in the other direction and headed for home. I mean, we're like, yeah, we're done for the night. And to be honest, we didn't go out the next night either. I mean, it was just kind of one of those. But finally, after that, when we did go out, I made sure to have a stronger flashlight with me.
Yeah, I bet. What state did this happen in, Seth?
This is in Oklahoma, the Broken Bow area. It's southeastern Oklahoma.
And so when you shine the light on it, how far away from you was the creature?
I'd say it was probably about 20 yards.
And was it mainly just the eyes is what you saw? I would imagine at 20 yards, It's kind of, if you have kind of a crappy flashlight, I would imagine it's kind of tough to get details from it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's really kind of all I saw was really the eyes. But, I mean, it kind of was really striking. Again, I was kind of on a bit of an incline in that area where we're standing. I mean, it was still a little bit taller than me. So, I mean, that's kind of how I based the height. I mean, I knew this is pretty big.
Yeah, 8 feet, it's something 8 feet tall. It's hard to put that in perspective, until you're actually come across something that big, and it makes you feel really, really small when you see something like that. What did you do next? Did you run home? Did you tell your folks, hey, I mean, what did you do?
I went home. All I told my parents was like, hey, it's real odd, lit up something with red eyes. And, yeah, they really didn't ask any other questions. It was kind of one of those, definitely didn't tell them how big it was. It was just kind of one of those, at the time, it was just like, not really sure what I saw. And, I really just didn't talk about it afterwards.
And that's pretty common, really, for people to do that. And so at what point did you stop and go, this is probably a Bigfoot? I mean, this thing's probably a Sasquatch is what I saw. At what point did you think that?
Probably a few years later, I kind of more wondered it and kind of suspected it. And so that had to come with, which our area's kind of gotten some publicity because of Bigfoot, but, it really came down to the newspaper ran an article about a hunter, and they didn't identify the hunter, and he was in his 60s, and he came out from the hunting woods and had spent all his life hunting and everything like that. And he just said he saw something, and he said, I'm never setting foot back in the woods again. And he was armed at the time. And when I read that report, and it's kind of the newspaper kind of speculated, well, is this Bigfoot? What is this? And I began to kind of really suspect it and kind of wonder it. And then it's kind of one of those, as, kind of just sit and wait, and kind of over time, more and more, reports would come out from different people. And then it's kind of one of those, okay, I'm pretty sure that, cause I started factoring, okay, height, red eyes. And that was one of the common things is just when you hit their eyes with a flashlight, they have red eyes.
Yeah. And that's definitely been reported. A lot of these news stations, I know you talked a little bit about it in your email. They make it out to be, crazy people are seeing these creatures. And it's just the opposite. I mean, I can, if these news stations want, I can provide some of the most sane people you ever talk to that run into these creatures and terrify them. A hunter who's armed and refuses to go back out in the woods, that tells you something right there. That guy saw something. That guy experienced something. And, it wasn't just some guy in a monkey suit that, people in monkey suits don't terrify hunters.
Right.
You see something 8 feet tall with red eyes like what you saw, and it terrifies you, man. It scares the hell out of you. I know later on you actually had another encounter. Do you want to talk about that? Tell us what you were doing.
Yeah, work as a contractor, work around cabins. I picked up a job clearing some brush around a cabin. There's a lot of, cabins are being built and have been built around this area. Really, it's kind of one of those, I came in, I'd already cut the brush, and man, I was just burning and supervising the burns, and I actually intended for it to go a lot quicker than it did, so I really wasn't prepared. So I didn't have a flashlight, anything of that nature. And as I was burning down kind of the final pile, it was starting to get dark, and so grabbed a big gulp cup, because the fire had gotten to a point where it's like, okay, I can leave this and safely leave it, and not have to worry about it catching a cabin on fire. But I'm still just, you're talking about $200,000-$300,000 cabins, and there's like 10 of them in the area. The last thing I want to do is start a fire. So I grabbed this big gulp cup, and there's a creek running behind this cabin. I went down to the creek, and Wes, I work out in the woods. I've spent a lot of time out in the woods, and so I've served overseas, did 2 tours in Iraq. I've kind of one of those things where going out in the woods don't bother me. And so you walk down the cabin, it's dark, because I've been staring into a fire, all freaking day. My night vision's kind of shot. I just started getting this sense like I was being watched. And, skipped up the water, carried it back to the fire, which was over by the road in front of the cabin, and just started, wetting down the area real good. And, just started taking trips back and forth the creek. Well, every time I went down that creek, the feeling just kept persisting. It got worse and got worse. And I finally went back up to the truck and went ahead and turned on my truck. And because where I was parked in the driveway, I was parked up by the road. I went ahead and hit my headlights, and because I just wanted to light up as much of the area as I'm having to walk as possible. Now, at the time, I was carrying a 12 gauge that belonged to a friend. Then I had 3 rounds of birdshot in there, and I carried that as a snake charmer, because we're in this area. I've come across some water moccasins before. And Wes, I said, I took the gun, I went ahead and set it in the back of the truck, just kind of went on, and when I went back down the creek and scooping up water, this smell came down from upstream. And it stank. It was like this musky, it was really strong odor. It's almost like something stunk had gotten into the water, and the scent was coming downstream. And that really kind of gave me a direction to start looking. And then, because it's one of those things, okay, this isn't in my head. there's something.
What did I don't mean to cut you off. What did the smell smell like?
I said it was a really musky, just, probably the closest to describe that smell. I think if you took an old diaper and threw it in a bag with a pair of some really dirty gym socks, and maybe you left them for about a month. It's just, there's almost like a smell like that. It's real strong, real distinct. And then, like I said, it's almost like there was for lack of a better term, I know people like to use this term, but almost like a muskiness about it too.
What did you think was causing the smell?
At that point, I was thinking, well, it's either the possibilities, it could be a Sasquatch. It could be a hog that has just been eating some kind of dead animal, or maybe a bear that's, may rolled in something that's been dead for like a week. Possibilities run through my mind, and then in the back of all my mind, of all that was, well, with my shotgun, if I get attacked by whatever it is out there, all of my rounds are going to do is just piss it off. And then it's kind of one of those little comical thoughts of like, well, upside is there will at least be a possible blood trail for, the police to follow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I've never really smelled that. I've heard people describe it, and everyone kind of describes it the same way. I mean, the worst smell possible. Basically just the worst smell possible. And so you're getting a whiff of this. You're getting water for the fire. What do you do next?
One is like, regardless of whatever it is, I'm not going to run. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to run off and, without properly wetting down around this area of the fire. Because the last thing I want to do is, jump in my vehicle and leave. And then, worst case scenario, fire gets out, burns down cabin or a whole area, and then I'm responsible. So it's just kind of force myself like, all right, I'm gonna keep doing my job. I'm just gonna keep plugging away, doing my job. I'm not gonna panic. And that's just what I did. Like I said, I mean, I've done 2 tours overseas in Iraq, and it's just like, the absolute worst case scenario, I get mauled by something. And best case scenario, nothing happens, and it's like, I'm just gonna keep doing my job. So I just kept going back and fire back. I noticed after a couple trips, the smell was gone. Like the smell had stopped coming off the water. And all that did was really confirm to me, okay, there is something upstream and out there. And that just kind of kept giving me a general direction to kind of look. But by then it's dark out. It's pitch black. There was no moon that night. So it was just kind of just looking. I said I kept doing it till I felt that area was sufficiently wetted down, and after that, it's like, started to relax a little bit, like, okay, I didn't smell that smell on the water anymore, and then kind of went and leaned up against the back of my truck and was just kind of relaxing a little bit before I was going to load up. And at that point, that's when I heard behind me across the road. Now, I want people to understand, this isn't like a big double wide road. This is a small road. I mean, it's like a single lane. Directly across the road from where I was standing, I mean, there was a very loud, audible snap. And it wasn't like a small twig. I mean, it sounded like you took like a pretty good sized stick and just clean snap break. And by that point, I'd also turned off my truck. So, I mean, I heard it very clearly, very distinctly. First thing entered my mind was, oh, Lord, whatever it is circled around me. And it was right behind me. Well, that shotgun was within easy reach. I mean, I just grabbed it, spun around and chambered around. And it's like, I might get one shot, if I get charged by something, but at least I'll have given it a go. And I just kind of stood there. I'm real big. I didn't point the gun across the road or anything because, I mean, I'm just real big. You don't point your gun at something unless you're going to shoot it.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of one of those. I mean, at that point, a lot of thoughts are running through your mind, and it's just like, all right, okay, whatever it is, it clear snaps. Like it wanted me to know it was there, but I also noted it didn't. Whatever it was, moved silently. If it could move that silently, it could have walked up behind me and just grabbed me. Whatever this is has clearly the ability to grab me, but hasn't.
So you hear the snap, and I would imagine, a normal snap wouldn't have caught your attention, but that real big pop, when, a huge branch breaks, and I know what you mean, caught your attention. Did you hear something walking around the woods, or was that pretty much it for the night?
That was pretty much it. That's the thing. Like, I've been out in the woods enough, and I mean, I've been out there around, all kinds of animals. I've been around bears. I've been out there around hogs. I've been around, all kinds of animals, and they all make noises out there. If you listen real close, you'll hear distinct noises. And I didn't hear a thing. That's what really disturbed me the most. Kind of like, where is moving silently? The whole time out there, like I never heard the noises, but I mean, it was, of it moving, but it managed to move around quietly.
Yeah, and that's the disturbing part. The other part of it is, I mean, that's disturbing when you can't hear it. The other part of it is that feeling of being watched. It's kind of like that same. It's kind of like the feeling of deja vu. in the sense of it's a real disturbing type feeling when you get it. I mean, you know right off the bat something's not right. And I'm glad you came out of it, man. How far from your home back, 15 years, 18 years prior was this cabin? I mean, are you guys in the same general area?
Oh yeah, I mean like 4 or 5 miles as crow flies, if that. I want to tell kind of something that happened about 5 minutes after the first snap. Real important. Again, to emphasize, I didn't hear footsteps. There was kind of an incline up this road. After about 5 minutes of me just kind of stand there, just kind of listening and waiting, there was another snap. But this was even bigger than the first snap. This sounded like somebody like you take a small tree and snap that. I mean, it was real clear. Again, it was real clear, real distinct. But again, I've been out in the woods. Usually I've been out there when limbs have fallen. I've been out there when trees have fallen, when stuff breaks, and again, that sounded like clean break. There's usually a falling sound, where it hits the ground. And there was just that second real loud snap, and nothing hit the ground at all. And so, but yeah, it was probably about 4 miles as crow flies from my first sighting.
Yeah. So did you finish up the job and just leave the area?
Yeah, I finished it. At that point, it actually kind of one of those like, all right, whatever it is. And by that point, I'm thinking, I was like, all right, this ain't a hog, this ain't a bear, and I'm pretty sure this is a Bigfoot. And but it's like, all right, it's moving away from me. And kind of at that point, it's like, I probably stayed on site probably another about 10 minutes to make sure, the fire's truly dying down before I loaded up and left. I have a friend that is an avid, amateur Bigfoot researcher for our area. And I went ahead and texted him before I left about what happened. I said, man, you're not going to believe this. He came back. He said, man, he came back with, you're definitely probably, in the presence of a Bigfoot out there. But he texted back that probably was like a week before that in one of those cabins somebody was staying in, and said the people came out one morning and there was a big pile of rocks left on their the little back porch area of the cabin.
Yeah, that's odd. How big were the rocks, did he say?
He didn't say. And I mean, I'm not even going to speculate because it would just truly be a speculation.
Well, one thing I want to do, I know your brother turned you on to the podcast. What's your brother's name?
His name's Matt.
I want to say thank you to Matt out there for listening, Matt. Definitely give him a quick shout out. Thanks for listening. And thank you, Seth, for coming on and sharing your experiences, man. I do appreciate it. And I know there's definitely stuff going on out there in Oklahoma. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Wes, man. Again, I appreciate it. I appreciate your show.
Well, thank you.
All right, Wes.
And next up on the show, I want to welcome Steve. Steve, thanks for being here tonight, man. I appreciate you coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And if you would, you had a very interesting encounter. I appreciated you sending me the blog when I had other people writing blogs. Mm-hmm. And I read through the encounter, and I was just fascinated by it. Before we jump into the encounter, did you do the drawing on it?
Yeah.
Of what you guys saw?
Yeah.
Wow, it looked like... Well, I don't want to ruin it for the audience. Let's start from the beginning. Tell us, what were you out doing? Who were you with? And just walk us right into it, Steve.
All right. Well, I was going every couple of years to go back and visit my family in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So we went, it was probably 1996, maybe to 1998. So I was probably 12 to 14. And we went back and we were visiting my family. And we have a house in Canada that's been in the family since late 1800s, probably like 1890. So we decided to take a trip up there and check on its condition, see if it had fallen over yet. So we got up there, and about, I'd say probably 50 yards from the house, you can walk down a hill, and there's a little creek back there. So me and my cousin, Pete, who's like 4 years younger than me, we decided to walk down there and just check out the creek and catch frogs or do whatever kids do. And we got probably 25 feet from the creek, and I just stopped and saw this thing sitting by the edge of the creek. And I stopped my cousin, and it just stopped me in my tracks. I couldn't even think. Like, I didn't smell anything, didn't hear anything, nothing like that. But it was like a grayish, almost white color. Not much bigger than I am now, and I'm like 6'2", 200 pounds. It was probably heavier, but it looked really bony and just nasty looking. I don't know if people have ever seen that movie Congo, the gray gorillas in it, the bad guys of the movie. It looks exactly like that, except more white. It wasn't moving or anything. It looked like its hand might have been in the creek. And as soon as it made a move, like it was possibly turning around, I just kind of looked at my cousin and we just took off running. And I just remember telling my parents that I saw this big thing that looked like a polar bear, like a skinny polar bear mixed with a gorilla kind of thing. And they said, it was probably just a big white dog or something. They never looked at it, and that was about it. Just never went back down there that time. And I've been down a million times since and never seen anything.
Now, how far away from this thing were you guys when you walked up on it?
I would say probably 25, 30 feet.
So you guys walk up on it. You're 25, 30 feet away from it. And how old were you at the time, Steve?
I want to say I was between 12 and 14.
And, obviously you'd seen many, many dogs at that point.
Yeah.
I know your parents said it might have been a dog. How many years later did you do the drawing of the creature that you saw?
I think I just did that last year. I kind of put it out of my mind until I started listening to your show more. And I mean, after this encounter, sighting, whatever you want to call it, I really got into Bigfoot and Sasquatch for a while after that. And before that, I don't even know if I'd ever seen even the Patterson-Gimlin footage before that. So when I saw it, I really didn't have any idea what it could be. And it was just years later when I kind of put two and two together of, well, it wasn't a damn polar bear or an ape or something. So I had to kind of figure out what it was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking at the sketch right now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an interesting sketch. It kind of reminds me of like a chimpanzee. I guess when I say chimpanzee, I mean
Mm-hmm.
the back arm is so long.
Yeah.
Way out of proportion for a person.
Yeah, and I was on Google the other day and I typed in Congo gray ape, and this picture came up of like a model of one, and it's facing you if you're looking at the picture. And the way it's sitting and everything looks exactly like what I saw, except flipped around. I mean, it's like to a T. Just the color was a little more gray in this picture than what I saw, but the coloring and everything, just and how bony it looked, just makes me think it was something really, really old.
Yeah, and it's funny you described it, I think, as like a 95-year-old man sitting there.
Exactly, that's what it looked like.
When you saw it, did you get the impression it was more animal or more man-like? I don't even know if that's a question you can answer. But
To me, it was definitely more animal-like. It was, I honestly want to say the size was like a big chimpanzee. Like I said, I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. And it was probably, when it was sitting down, it was probably 3.5, 4 feet tall, like from its butt cheeks to its head. And I don't really know how long the legs were because it was the way it was kind of crouched there. It was almost like sitting on its own heels.
When you saw it, did you see its face? Did it turn towards you guys?
No, I just saw the back of its head. And like I said, it almost seemed like it was starting to turn. And that's when I just got this feeling of get the hell out of there. So my cousin, who was about 4 years younger than me, we just took off, and he was in front of me, and we ran up the hill. And I talked to him the other day, and he kind of remembers our parents saying, yeah, it was probably just a dog. He doesn't remember like what he saw, but he remembers seeing something and in the discussion afterwards.
Did you guys, was there anything else strange that happened around that property? I mean, have you talked to your folks since then and said, hey, listen, that wasn't a dog?
I haven't. I've talked to my mom recently about it, and she's just kind of like, yeah, it is, whatever. But my great-grandparents actually lived there, and they're both dead now, so I can't talk to them about it. And my dad used to spend every summer up there, and I haven't talked to him, so I was thinking about talking to him, but it's kind of a weird, a weird discussion to start because he's not the type to open up about things like that. But it's worth a try.
Yeah, it's always worth a try. You know, some of these hard-nosed, old-school guys, a lot of time, especially guys that are, you know, mountain men, I guess what I consider mountain men, you know, old-school hunters.
Yeah.
When you ask them, and you think they're gonna, well, not your father, but some of these other guys, you think they're gonna punch you in the nose after you ask them. But a lot of times, you know, they'll tell you flat out, yeah, here's what I saw, here's what you know. So it might be worth it. Talk to your dad. You know, it's tough to kind of keep this in for so many years. You know, gosh.
Yeah, back I know in the 70s, like when my dad used to go up there, there was he had a lot of family up there, like aunts and uncles, and they had a bunch of farmland around there. Now it's all grown in, like it's just like forested, and there's grasses everywhere. And back in that area, if you kept going straight, there's just nothing. But I know back in the day, I'm pretty sure it was all farmland. I don't know if it was even possible for something to be around back then, but it's all overgrown now. So,
yeah. Well, it's an interesting encounter, man. I'm really glad that you decided to come on and share it. And for the people listening, under this episode, I will post a picture of what Steve saw. And Steve, thanks for coming on, man. I really do. I know there's like a drinking game. Every time I say appreciate, people take a drink. But I really am, man. It's very sincere. I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing the story. I think it's awesome. I think it's a cool encounter.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was good to finally talk about it.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time.
No problem. Thank you.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. Wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. Remember, the truth is out there, and don't go chasing lights down in the woods. Until next time, everyone, have a good night.